Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this video, I had a special request to go over the ankle and how it's rated. So this one might not be a sizzle video for a lot of people, but I'm sure it's going to clear up a few things for you when it comes to the ankle, because there's some misconceptions about the ankle, especially around instability of the ankle, because typically the knee can be broken out into uh, many different disabilities, and the knee itself is a hinge joint where typically the knee only goes either flexion or extension. It doesn't go ab or adduction away from the body or towards the body. So it typically has one plane of motion that it goes forward and back. So the knee can be broken out into different things. So a lot of individuals think that the ankle should behave similarly to how the hip does, because the ankle is a synovial joint. It can kind of move in all directions. So we're going to kind of talk about that today. We're going to talk about what can be rated, what can't be rated. So this might not be a big sizzle video for you, but please, if you can, watch until the end if you can tolerate my voice. So let's go ahead and get into it. So let me go ahead and remove this, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to we're going to dive into it really early about the instability portion of it. So unfortunately, based upon this manual reference here, 531B4J, which is talking about specifically instability of the ankle, we are not allowed to assign separate evaluations for limitation of motion, LOM, and instability of the ankle. Unfortunately, the way that this is intended to be is that the ankle itself is diagnosed under 5271, and that particular 5271 rating is meant to address all facets, minus ankylosis, but all facets of ankle disabilities, to address the overall ankle disability without limiting the focus to one specific type of ankle symptomology. So basically what they're saying is we're just going to lump everything under 5271, and that's it. That's the playground that you get to play in. So ankle limitation of motion, let me see here, modern evaluation of symptoms. Yeah. So basically that's what we're talking about. Is ankle has been, by the powers that be, decided that range of motion is it. Painful motion, again, is something else. But we also have Ingram v. Collins that we can consider in this evaluation too. So let me move on here. So when we come over here to the 38 CFR Part 4, the ankle doesn't have very many ways that you can go about it. It's a very short entry in the musculoskeletal body system. So the lion's share of veterans' disabilities will be rated under 5271 for ankle, regardless of disability, with the exceptions being ankylosis of the ankle, like a frozen joint. It'll be frozen in a favorable way or an unfavorable way. And I'm just going to go over the whole ankle here just because there's not too much to it. So in terms of ankylosis, flexion, plantar flexion, it has to do with the, pointing your toes versus trying to pull up your foot. You'd have to meet these range of motion requirements. So it would be fixed between these particular degrees. Now, if you're doing a CMP examination and you legitimately have ankylosis that is diagnosed, if the examiner does not bring out a goniometer, the thing that they use to measure kind of the degrees of movement, if they don't use that for ankylosis of the ankle, and for almost anything, I would immediately after that particular exam call and lodge a complaint to the vendor or VHA that did the exam. Because eyeballing it isn't fair, because it's the difference between 20, 30, and 40% is based upon what they eyeball it and go, okay, medically it's kind of in this range, versus legally the ranges matter. and it matters more than you can ever, like yeah, it's very valuable. So for ankylosis, it's rated under 5270, and that's my suggestion for if you have a legitimate diagnosis of ankylosis and you go to an exam. Now, like I said, the lion's share of all ankle service connected disabilities are going to be under 5271. And 5271 only has two entries for it. You can either get, well, three. You can get 0% for having the diagnosis with perfect range of motion, right? You have no limitations to range of motion. And then we start at 10% for painful motion, or if your range of motion is deemed, if your limitation is deemed moderate, with less than 15 degrees of dorsiflexion and less than 30 degrees of plantar flexion. So the thing I really like about the ankle disabilities is that they actually qualify what moderate means to them. This is not the case in every single situation. Like if you have foot disabilities, for example, like certain foot disabilities, they'll say, okay, mild, moderate, or severe, or even neurological conditions, mild, moderate, or severe. It would be very nice if the manual was updated that anytime it referenced moderate, any kind of mild, moderate scale, that it put the context to it, like what that looks like, what that means. So that way the veteran community could be informed about it. But anyway, so you're either dealing with painful motion, you're dealing with limitation of range of motion to this degree, or if you're taking pain medication and the limitation of motion was to this degree, then you could invoke Ingram v. Collins. So that's the kind of the first way that you can get above 0%. Now, the second way, and I don't understand why they use the word marked here, but it's kind of weird. Once again, the people that write the 38 CFRs and the M21 manual, they just do their own thing. And there's no kind of consistency throughout, but it has to be identified by limitations in range of motion. Now, painful motion only gets you to the 10%. So in order to get higher than 10% to meet the 20% ankle evaluation level, you have to have range of motion that is less than 5 degrees of dorsiflexion, or, and this is important for these ors, it can be anything on the left of the or anything on the right of the or, not both. So either 5 degrees of dorsiflexion or less than 10 degrees of plantar flexion. Now, once again, this is where you're going to have, flare-ups can help you. Like if you are someone who experiences flare-ups due to your condition and the doctor agrees that you do experience flare-ups, then your flare-ups could limit you to this level of range of motion impairment, qualifying you for the 20%. The same is true for Ingram v. Collins. If you have independent evidence that shows that when you're not medicated, you have restricted range of motion that meets this criteria, you could use Ingram v. Collins to get you to the 20%. Now, the majority of veterans, when they claim musculoskeletal conditions, they'll claim like the wrist, they'll claim the ankle. And a lot of them believe that 10% is like the maximum you can get for an ankle joint because they treat it like it's the wrist. The wrist is like 10%, and they don't know that you can get higher than 10%. So it's important that you know that. Now, I will address a little bit lower here. These are very unique situations. Like this is the unique of the unique. Okay. So if you have this, then you have to treat it with the respect that not every single rater is going to understand this, because they might go their entire career and never rate any of these. Okay. So what would it take to get 5272, 5273, and 5274? Well, it would take an actual diagnosis, one that checks all these boxes. All the words here would have to be checked. And then on the DBQ, the boxes would have to be checked for whichever one. And then same thing with here. We'd have to have the actual diagnosis checked on the DBQ, and then they'd have to check the correct box. But as you can see here, see where it says moderate deformity? What does that mean? Like, they didn't qualify it like they did here. I wish that they would qualify things when they say moderate deformity. What are the road marks or landmarks for that? Like, how do I tell as the rater what moderate deformity is, so I can look through your records, and if they say it's mild deformity, I can go, well, wait a minute. The records here contrast that. They disagree, and they say that that it falls under moderate. Could you please fix this? And I think that's probably why they don't do it a lot of the times, is because they don't want the raters to be fighting kind of semantics with the examiners. But I'm for fairness in the review. So if I'm evaluating that moderate deformity is a thing, I need to know what the context of that is. But I digress. And then we come down here to this last word. We look, I'll trust you, or I would trust the examiner. If they check this box, I'm going to trust them implicitly. Like, I don't know what this is. I have no clue. You get 20% for it if you're diagnosed. Cool. I mean, I have no way to fact check that. I mean, I can Google what the term means, but I don't know what the treatment for it looks like. And like, we're not supposed to do that. In the same way that we're not supposed to go and look at your social media and whatnot, we're not supposed to go through and start evaluating your treatments. We're not supposed to go in and see, like, hey, look, this is the diagnosis. This is how it's normally treated. I don't see those treatments, so I don't think the diagnosis is there. Some raters get really deep into that as well. Like, that's another thing that they do. Some of them do, I will say, is that they will go through and they will review to see. This is how a lot of your private DBQs get disqualified, where there's nothing saying what the requirements are to diagnose this, but they will start going on to Google. They'll go on to WebMD. Typically, they go to the Mayo Clinic is where they go, because that's what the VA uses. And then they'll determine whether or not you have the criteria to meet the the diagnosis criteria, even though it's not their job. I personally would take, if they diagnose that, there's nothing in the M21 manual that says I have, like, that there's any kind of criteria. Sometimes you'll find a condition like sinusitis that sometimes requires a x-ray in order to confirm the diagnosis. If we have situations like that where the M21 manual instructs us that there's a diagnostic test needed to diagnose it, then I get that, right? We're going to search for that. Same thing with like prostate cancer and biopsies. We're going to search for that. But there are some raters who question the diagnosis. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are like, that is just not true. I've never done that in my life. And I'm not saying that you have. I'm just saying that I know people that do this. People are weird. And contrary to popular belief, it is easy to get your points in the day. And you have a lot of time to do research. You can either work on claims for tomorrow or you can do research. So I don't know. I digress. I've spent way too much time on this. But this is about it for the ankle. Like, whenever you come to like how the ankle is rated, which might seem a little weird, but oftentimes this is what you're marking for. These are the criteria, range of motion, So that's basically it. Now, as per usual with these kind of videos, I'm going to go to the DBQ and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, not that big. Wait, whoop. Come on, computer. You can do it. Okay, we'll make it that big. So this is a veteran-facing DBQ for the ankle conditions. And you can either have, go to the VA examiner. They will fill this out. Or you can go to, do a private DBQ for it. I'm going to be talking about both. And I think it's funny that they put this on here. The VA will not reimburse any expenses or costs incurred in the process of completing or submitting this form. Well, you know what, VA? Maybe you should pay for it, because then you might accept them a little more often if you had to pay for every single one and it didn't get used. Maybe that's a thing. Hell, I'm writing that down. We're doing a video on it. I'm keeping this in the video, but yeah, VA pay for exams. So back to the DBQ here. So we're like all the other DBQs, it has this pretty standard, qualifier who completed the disability questionnaire, who asked you to do it, are you a VA health provider? These are normal, simple answers. Evidence reviewed. So this is going to be, especially if you're invoking Ingram v. Collins, you're going to need to have put the evidence in front of the examiner if you're dealing with a private DBQ. Also, if you're dealing with like the VA examiner, you want to make sure they have access to all of your records. So it might be good to kind of know the general classifications of the evidence that you submitted and ask them up front, hey, did you review? I sent in a private study, or I sent in Dr. Smith's diagnosis for my ankylosis of the ankle. Did you get that? Because you want them to make sure that they have that evidence. So when they're doing the evidence review, it's complete. Be it on the private DBQ side or the VA examiner side. So the rater's going to review this. So if you're doing a private DBQ, you cannot say, the examiner cannot say that they reviewed evidence that they didn't have access to. Just keep that in mind. Make sure they don't do that, because that's a quick authenticity, we're going to throw the DBQ in the trash type situation. Now, this particular section is the diagnosis section. Now, this is the worst box that you can ever see. Has to do with there's no current diagnosis. So this has to do with element 1 for every single theory for service connection that you could potentially get it granted for. Element 1, if they check this box, then you do not have element 1, the current diagnosis, which means that even if you had evidence of symptoms, the examiners overruled that evidence and determined that there is no medical diagnosis. This will be denied. So anytime that you have a checkbox here, this will be denied. Now, what happens if you went for an increase? Like, let's say you had ankle strain and you got service connected for ankle strain, and the examiner goes through and they kind of disagree with the fact that it should have ever have been rated. I saw this in the comments the other day, so I wanted to kind of address this. Sometimes you'll get these advocate examiners who will go, I would have never have done that. And then they'll say, like, there's no diagnosis. So what typically happens in that circumstance is that we will send the claim back. We'll defer the claim back for clarification and or insufficiency. I would lean more towards insufficiency, because for the examiner to change the diagnosis, there has to be a rationale. And they'll probably provide a rationale. Trust me. Like, when they feel strongly about something that should have never been diagnosed, they'll leave a rationale. The only problem is that examiner cannot invoke a clear and unmistakable error. So they're just kind of wasting their time writing all this out, because I'm going to keep the old, unless there's a CU and E, I'm going to keep the old diagnosis. And even if they change it, as long as you have painful motion of a joint, I'm going to keep it at 10%, because even without a diagnosis, you're still diagnosis, you're still service connected. It's a chronic disability. And if you have 10% for painful motion, then I'm going to just do that. So what we see a lot of, like, there's a lot of different diagnosis, which is not the same as this portion right here. As you can see, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's only 5 entries here, but there are a lot of diagnosis. So what typically happens is that the majority of all of these things, they get pigeonholed under 5271. And hold on just a second. I forgot to add something, so I'm going to add it real quick. Sorry, we're a little bit out of order today. I had pre-coffee. So the other thing that can be rated, and I kind of eyeballed this and forgot about it. The 6th thing that can be rated for the ankle is if you have a total ankle replacement, total prosthetic. So if that happens, you'd be rated under 50-56, and you get 100%. You get temporary 100% for 1 year following the total ankle replacement. These are so rare that I've never done one. I've never heard of one done, but that's why I forgot about it. But just keep in mind that this can be a thing. So, what would happen here is you'd get 1 month of convalescence and then 1 year of actual temporary 100%. So, it actually equals 13 months of temporary 100%. Once you have your total ankle replacement of the ankle joint, the minimum rating is 20%. And then if you have, after you're done and after a healing period of that year, you will go to the 40% if you have these particular symptoms right here. Now, you can also be rated at 5270 or 5271 if that better fits, like if that's more advantageous than the 40%. But I just thought I would bring that up because I forgot about it. I actually was looking down here at the ankle joint replacement and went, oh no, I forgot. But so there's 6 different things on here, but if it's not part of those specifically cited diagnosis, then they'll all fall under the ankle under 5271, no matter what they are. Like arthritis and whatnot, 5271. Post-traumatic, 5271. Osteoporosis, 5271. Bursitis, 5271. Now, what you'll oftentimes see is they'll come down here and they'll go right ankle strain. You know, a sprain is temporary, so strains are more of a chronic condition. So you just see that. Now, moving on here, you can have additional diagnosis. One of the more common ones is shin splints. And I will be talking about shin splints of the ankle and the knee more in the future. Now we come down here to medical history. And I'm sorry this is going to be a hot mess, but we're doing it live. Medical history is similar to the evidence review. This is where the raters are going to go, and they're going to be reviewing the evidence to make sure that everything is dress right dress, that there are no inconsistencies with the statements made, no conflicting evidence that is being reported by the examiner, be it a VA doctor or a private doctor filling out a private DBQ. So it is always a good idea to go to the medical evidence of any DBQ and make sure that it matches up, because if you went to a VA doctor, one of the things that you could do is if they started spouting off nonsense that's not in your medical records and they used that as a means to qualify you for a lower rating, then you would actually potentially do a higher level review and just cite the inconsistent information and say that the rater did not do the duty to assist by having that information clarified. So that's one of the options. The other thing is for medical history, if you're having somebody fill out a private DBQ, medical doctors sometimes don't understand the legal requirements and they'll take liberties with explaining connections to things that might not line up directly with your evidence. It's a good idea to fact check them on it and go, well, wait a minute, that's not true, actually. Could you please take that out? Just some food for thought. Now, if you are a veteran who potentially qualifies for the 20%, due to this very extreme limitation of motion, one of the ways that you're going to potentially qualify for that is if you have flare-ups. So you want to make sure that if you are a veteran who has flare-ups, you want to make sure that, this matches it. Like if you're somebody that has flare-ups in your records and you can show limitation of motion, you want to make sure that the DBQ reflects that. And then functional loss has to be recorded, but I'm going to tell you functional loss here is not like just by saying that you have functional loss. To grant that, it requires more than just them saying it right here. Now, this question just cracks me up because this question is not usable by the VA. Because we do not have any separate, instability doesn't change your rating in any way, shape, or form. So this question doesn't matter. It could be answered either way. They could say, yes, it's totally dislocated all the time. Range of motion. So similar to, I think, the knees, this is side by side. And as a rater, I love this because I can actually look and see in real time the differences. And even though I can't process them at the same time, I hate it whenever they stagger. Like we're gonna do normal range of motion for the right ankle, and then below its normal range of motion for the left ankle. It makes it very hard to find, and it slows down your process, and it makes it easier for you to actually transcribe, have an operator error, I guess is what I'm going to say. So having them left and right like this keeps things clean, and I love it. Um, so what we're looking for, obviously, like all DBQs, they say this is the flexion, this is the plane of motion that we're measuring, and then this is what the normal range of motion should be. So anything less than that, so if we were at 40, then you would be abnormal range of motion because you're restricted by 5 degrees down to 40. So when we're talking about this, less than 5 degrees of dorsiflexion, less than 10 degrees of plantar flexion. In order to get the 20%, you would have to have 0 to, well, let's say 3 degrees, and let's say 5 degrees. Wait, dorsy? Hold on. Let me double check myself. 5 degrees dorsy and 10 plantar. Sorry, I got that wrong. I got them backwards. So if you had this right here, which I'm going to be honest with you, this is a very weird. They typically round up to fives. I don't know why examiners do that. They don't do precise measurements, but they round up to 5, 10, 15, 20. You know, like they go by fives. It's very weird. Now, this right here would get you 20%. If they mark either one of these or both for painful motion, that will get you the minimum 10%. Going down here, passive range of motion isn't really measured. We don't really use it. And keep in mind, we will add in all of these range of motions on your in VBMSR, and the computer will take the worst one, like the most limiting range of motion, and apply that one. So it's once the hard part is transcribing the data into VBMSR. So we're just data entry specialists on the ankle. Observed range of motion, very important. So, and then we just do that same thing. The only one that matters here is pain. That's it. Like that's the only one to get you the 10%. Fatigability, weakness, lack of endurance, we don't care. It doesn't have any bearing on your rating decision whatsoever. You can have all of these checked, but if pain's not checked and your range of motion is normal, you're getting 0%. Repeated use over time, same thing. Now, I will say that you have to have your evidence in here for Ingram v. Collins. So you need to make sure that a lot of the time the language isn't forward facing to the veteran. So I made that post. Well, I can make a post with the language on it so you kind of know how the 3 questions are worded for you. I'll probably do that today for Ingram v. Collins so you can see what the actual examiner looks at. And then because you're going to have to talk to the examiner for Ingram v. Collins, they're not going, and I'm just going to make this a broad generalization. A lot of them might do this, but I'm going to side with the worst case scenario is a lot of examiners are not going to ask you about Ingram v. Collins unless you bring it up. Unless you bring up the fact that you're on pain medication and that your pain medication makes your range of motion better. So just keep that in mind. And then we come down here to atrophy, not really anything that's related to the ankle. This is the section for ankylosis. So when we go back here, it's going to be 5270. This is the ankylosis section. The section up here is for 5271. All these range of motions are for 5271. And then as we come down here, they're just going to get more specific. Joint stability, we don't care about because it's all tied into 5271. Additional comments, shin splints. Shin splints are a thing. They should be rated separately, but when shin splints are involved with the ankle and when shin splints are involved with the knee, only one of the joints, typically the ankle joint, would get the 10% limitation of motion over shin splints. They both cannot get the 10% for painful motion, but you can, like, this is going to be kind of stupidly weird, and I don't know how this works yet, but you can get Ingram v. Collins to get you 20% if your fact pattern matches up with it. If you're taking pain medication and your pain medication causes you to have to qualify for the 20% based upon limitation of motion, I personally do not see a world where you could get 20% for the ankle under Ingram v. Collins. You should be able to also get shin splints at 10% for painful motion because you didn't use painful motion to get to the 20% for the ankle. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling right here, but it's kind of a thought experiment. Surgical procedures. This is going to be where we're talking about the total ankle joint replacement if needed. So what they really want, if you somehow qualified for this, what they really want is they want the date of the surgery, who did it, and you need to make sure that evidence is of record. Like, I would submit that with my claim. And then we come down here. Assistive devices do not factor into the ankle rating. Functional use, it doesn't really factor into the rating. Diagnostic testing, this is going to be potentially x-rays for certain things. Post-traumatic arthritis, I mean, it gets rated under the ankles 5271, so it doesn't necessarily matter. Test and findings. Functional impact doesn't really matter because it requires a little bit more than just the statements made in a DBQ to get you to functional to employment status. Like, we need to know that you're unemployed. We need to know that your rating criteria meets the 38 CFR for it. We need to know that we have to solicit a claim from you. Like, there's a lot of things that have to happen. So I know that some attorneys go, oh, it was marked yes, so the rater didn't follow up on it, so it's a CUNE. No, it's not. I mean, there would have to be a certain set of specific things that needed to happen in order for us to have missed IU, raising IU to issue. The remarks section is going to be another one where the rater is going to be heavily scrutinizing the statements made in here for any kind of conflicting evidence. So please keep that in mind. And then we come down here to the examiner's certification and signature. Now, as always, if it's a VA examiner, they have a different set of criteria. But if it's a private DBQ that's completed, you need to make sure that the date of the form is updated. You need to go onto va.gov to get your forms whenever you do. You need to make sure that the examiner's signature, printed name with their credentials matches everything on their NPI number index. So when you go and look up, I suggest if you're doing a private DBQ, you ask the provider for their national provider index number, and then you go search their number and then make sure that their address matches what's on this website, on the NPI lookup. If it's not, then the VA can toss it for inauthenticity, fraud, a plethora of things. So please just keep that in mind. Now, that's about all I got for you on this one. I'd like to take some time to thank all the individuals that are watching the videos and all the individuals that are, subscribing, becoming members, all the fun stuff. I'm sorry if this one seems a little rushed, but I'm kind of pre-coffee, so I wanted to do a video on my day off before I went and got coffee, which sounded like a good idea at the time, but I'm better with coffee. Anyway, that's about all I got for you on this one. Raider out.